Hello there, Grumpy Old Fart here. I'm doing it's not really an AD&D story. I'm telling about a book that came out in the mid '80s, and this book is called Oriental Adventures. This book was published as an addition to the Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Player's Handbook and the Unearthed Arcana. I bought my first copy of the Oriental Adventures while I was in the United States Air Force. I believe it came out shortly after the Unearthed Arcana, but don't quote me on that. I'm not sure when it came out. I'm not sure which one came first, I should say. Regardless, this tome is a treasure trove of information and rules regarding the Oriental gameplay in an AD&D setting. It was awesome. I loved it. When I was a kid, I grew up watching Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, Saturday morning Kung Fu Theater. It was just wonderful. And this book was a wellspring of adventure. I was enamored. As soon as I opened it, I was enamored. As soon as I opened the front cover, boom. This book has new character classes. The Oriental Barbarian, the Bushi, which is kind of a fighter, the Kensei, which is another kind of a fighter called it translates to Sword Saint, but they let you use whatever weapon you want, including unarmed combat. The Yakuza, which is a type of a thief. The Monk, the monk should have been there all along. However, they also have Occidental monks. I allow both because the monk that they talk about here is different than the monks in the Oriental Adventures. So I try to differentiate the two. I allow people to run both in my games. Either, I should say. They have the ninja, which obviously is an assassin. The samurai, which equivalents to kind of like a knight or a cavalier. They have the shukenya, which is a cleric, more or less. And the sohi, which is kind of like a paladin. It's about the closest thing they've got to a paladin. He's a warrior trained in religion, and he can cast spells and blah, blah, blah. And they have their own type of a wizard called a wujin. And I loved them. I loved each class had its own special abilities. It was awesome. Every class had their own key powers, K-I, key powers. They're kind of like mind spirit powers. Mind over matter kind of thing. It had cultural information to allow you to run in that setting, so you could run like in China or Japan or wherever. It had its own geography and place names and things like that. So it was a different world, but it allowed you to run in that setting, and it was brilliant. Best of all, in my opinion, it had martial arts. Not only basic martial arts, karate, kung fu, blah, 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 but styles that you could create and ways to combine styles into new styles. So if you learn this style and then you learn that style, you can combine them into your own style and teach it. This was like Shangri-La. Man, I was in love with this book. It is freaking awesome. Running an all-Oriental game is fantastic. The culture, the politics, the religion, the society, it's just... And with this one book, if you have all the other D&D books and you get this book, it allows you to run it because all of this stuff is discussed in the book, Oriental Adventures. It's wonderful. And it's highlighted so you can do it properly. In an Oriental setting, this book is wonderful. I highly recommend it. Okay? Unfortunately, when I was running the game, and one of my players decided he wanted to run a wujin, or a ninja, or whatever. As I recall, he wanted to run a ninja. So he ended up having a bushi ninja, so he'd get the kind of like a fighter assassin kind of thing going on. I found some problems when I mixed Oriental Adventures with the Occidental Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, the standard D&D. Oriental characters are much more powerful due to the key powers and the martial arts. This is fairly easily remedied, and I'm going to go into that here in a second. If you plan to let your players run Oriental characters alongside your standard AD&D player characters, you need to give the Oriental characters some kind of disadvantage, hamstring is too strong a word. Not hobble them either, but you understand what I'm saying. You got to give them a bit of a. I had the word in my mind just a minute ago and it went away. Amazing. Sucks getting old. My point is, you gotta give them a bit of a cultural disadvantage. I usually what I found works really well is I usually make the Oriental player characters learn common during actual gameplay. So for the first several months, they rely on these Occidental characters, and you develop that friendship, and that way when they're in the course of normal gameplay, it works out. And this levels the playing field and gives the Oriental player characters a reason to rely on these Occidental players. Now, also found out that during the course of gameplay, these Occidental characters want to learn martial arts. And the reason martial arts are great is because anybody can learn them. The bad part is you have to be careful letting martial arts into your game, because into a standard game, because I mean it works good in Oriental settings because anybody can have them. In Occidental Dungeons and Dragons, if you let an Oriental character come in and he's got martial arts, he can smack somebody with his open hand and do as much damage as a sword. So yeah, that can be a problem. One of my favorite character classes in Oriental Adventures is the Kensei, because I take, or the monk or whatever, one of those, because they you can heavily rely them. The monk relies on martial arts. The Kensei can take martial arts as a specialty weapon and gets all kinds of bonuses. He could be butt naked and still have his weapon, his specialty weapon. So, but this simple remedy about the language barrier allowed one player to run it was a Bushi Ninja in my Occidental campaign for 13 years. It was wonderful. Okay, I took the player character. It took the player character a while to learn common. He was forced to rely on and befriend the other players, and it really worked out well, because then when he had learned common, he didn't need them anymore. But they had developed that rapport, and there was a reason for them to stay together in the group. You see what I'm saying? Take your time letting them learn common. Don't take it as your language and you're done. Don't do that. Take your time. Let them learn the language. That will allow your players... Oriental players in an Occidental setting kick everybody's ass. So just let them... You got to give them some kind of a disadvantage. So anyway, that's my advice when you're doing it. Otherwise, if you run just a regular Oriental campaign with everybody running Oriental characters, man, knock yourself out. Do whatever you want. It's awesome. Hope this helps everybody. And again, I'm not saying this is how you have to do it, but this is how I did it and it worked, so that's what I recommend. Again, Oriental Adventures, an absolutely wonderful book. I highly recommend it, and it'll be a great addition to your D&D game. You folks have a good day. God bless one and all.